Chapter 1. Nero is not himself. London, April 1909. The red-headed kitchen maid whistled a cheery tune before tumbling over a small brown Yorkshire terrier. A tray of finger sandwiches crashed to the ground with her.
"Ethel!"
snapped Mrs. Dell, wiping her round face with the back of her wrist.
"Fancy letting Nero do that! You'll have to make them all again."
Ethel looked up from the floor.
"Oh, but Mrs. Dell, the floor is spotless. I cleaned it this morning."
Nero gobbled a ham sandwich by her foot. The cook placed both hands on her hips.
"Over 3 years I've taught you here, Ethel, and you haven't learned a blooming thing, have you? Imagine what Lady Dorsey would say if we served her sandwiches that had been on the kitchen floor. The floor you've been treading over all day with those clumsy feet of yours. Make them again."
She turned to the blonde 12-year-old maid, who was clipping on Nero's collar and lead.
"Alice, that's the 3rd time this week that dog has been running loose in my kitchen."
"Sorry, Mrs. Dow."
Alice brushed Nero's paw prints from the apron of her light grey print dress.
"He slipped his whole collar. He's been acting mad all week." "Nero must know Master Theo's coming back from school today," said Ethel,
dusting off a cheese sandwich before popping it into her mouth.
"Oh, I see," said Mrs. Dell in a sarcastic tone. "The dog knows what date it is, does he? I really have had it with you, Ethel. And stop shoveling those dirty sandwiches in your mouth." "I'll take them off your hands, Mrs. D,"
said a boy who had been watching the commotion from a wooden stool by the stove. He wore a brown suit that made him look much older than his 13 years. The cook blushed.
"No, Reggie. You'll have fresh sandwiches with us after their tea upstairs. And I've saved a slice of pie for you to take home to your dear ma." "You're a treasure, Mrs. D."
Reggie smiled, his brown eyes shining.
"And the finest cook in London." "Oh, you," Mrs. Dell chuckled, before turning to Ethel with a frown. "Hurry up with those sandwiches. When I come back from the lavatory, I want this all cleared up."
Mrs. Dell left the room, and Ethel stepped over to the bin with the dropped sandwiches.
"No,"
cried Reggie.
"I'll take them back to Cable Street. Archibald's quite partial to a cucumber sandwich."
Ethel went to fetch a paper bag from the pantry. Alice stared at Reggie, who happily sipped tea.
"Does your boss mind you spending so much time away from the shop? You're in the kitchen more than I am."
"No, not with all the money Mrs. D spends on groceries."
Reggie winked.
"Especially when Ethel drops half of it all."
Ethel slammed the bag down into Reggie's lap.
"Here's your sandwiches. I hope you choke on them."
"I'm only teasing."
Reggie leaned down to stroke Nero, who had followed the bag of food towards his feet.
"What's up with this fella?"
"He keeps barking in the schoolroom," said Alice. "Usually at night. It woke Lord and Lady Dorsey up one time, so now he sleeps in mine and Ethel's room in the attic." "And that hasn't stopped him," wailed Ethel. 3 times he had me up last night. I say we should take him to the vet."
The three watched as Nero ran zigzag across the room before rolling on his back. Reggie tilted his head.
"He seems lively enough."
"He keeps clawing the wall in the schoolroom," said Alice. "I didn't know why, but last week I heard sounds coming from the other side."
"New neighbours at No.7?
Reggie jumped up from his stool.
"They'll need a grocer."
"No, not No.7, cried Ethel. "It's been empty for years. Mrs. Dell says some foreigner owns it who never goes there."
Alice frowned.
"I heard someone in there, I'm sure of it. And so did Nero."
Ethel paused and clutched her apron before shaking her head.
"No, it can't be,"
she muttered to herself.
"What?"
said Alice.
"Oh, I'm sure it's nothing."
Ethel placed a new loaf of bread on the chopping board.
No, it's silly. Although, Mrs. Dell said it was nonsense."
"Just tell us," cried Alice.
"Well,"
Ethel checked behind her to make sure the cook had not returned.
"The maid that was here before you thought there were bad spirits next door.
Reggie leaned forward with a mischievous grin.
Some rum that had gone off?
No, I didn't mean... Oh, I'm not talking to you.
Ethel attacked the loaf with a bread knife.
Tell me, Alice urged. You mean she thought there were ghosts? Yes. Lots of movements inside. At one point, she told Mr. Simpkins, and he spoke to the constable. They went in, so I was told, and the place was empty. But the noises started again that very night.
Alice rested her hand on her chin.
If they are spirits, how did she know they were bad ones? Because nobody ever moves in there, said Ethel. They drive everyone away. The spirits aren't friendly to people.
Let's see if they drive us away.
Reggie winked at Alice and walked up the stairs at the rear of the kitchen.
You can't go up there,
called Alice.
Why not? You don't even work here.
Reggie continued until he was out of sight. Ethel gasped.
Go and get him before Mr. Simpkins sees.
She dreaded to think how the butler would react to the grocer's delivery boy being upstairs. Alice scooped up Nero and chased after Reggie. When she reached the green baize door separating the servants' quarters from the family rooms, the boy had already let himself into the hallway. He stood on the black and white checkered floor, staring around him at the tall grandfather clock and the large staircase.
Nice gaff, ain't it? Reggie,
hissed Alice, her heart thumping.
Are you trying to get me dismissed?
Where's the schoolroom?
I'm not telling you. Get back here.
Reggie walked up the stairs. Nero wriggled free from Alice's arms and followed him.
Not you too.
Alice knew it would be pointless to stop the pair.
Ugh, this way.
She led them past the drawing room when she heard a door handle being turned. In a rush, she pulled Reggie up the next flight of stairs. Nero barked as the drawing room door opened.
Alice,
cried the voice of the head housemaid.
Control this monster.
Alice ran back down and grabbed the fiery terrier.
Sorry, Mabel. I'm taking him upstairs.
The 20-year-old rolled her eyes.
Don't know why we still have the brute.
After waiting for Mabel to go downstairs, Alice returned to Reggie and grabbed his wrist with her free hand.
This way.
Reggie shook her off.
Easy. You're cutting off my circulation. Why the panic? It was only Mabel. You don't know her. She's been in a foul mood lately. Lady Dorsey's had a lady's maid vacancy for ages, and she won't give it to her. Come on, it's over here.
She led them into the schoolroom and knelt down next to the rocking horse.
This is where it came from.
They both pressed their ears to the wall. Reggie creased his eyebrows.
I can't hear anything. You don't really believe all that guff about spirits, do you? No, not really.
Alice blushed.
But I did hear a noise before. A scrambling. Rats?
Alice shivered.
I hope not. No, I don't think it was.
Reggie banged his palm on the wall 3 times, making Alice jump.
Reggie! Shh!
After a moment, Reggie banged on the wall another 3 times.
I can hear movement.
He cleared his throat.
Can you hear me?
Alice looked over her shoulder at the door.
I don't know about ghosts, but the whole house will if you don't pipe down.
Reggie continued in a loud voice.
If you can hear me, knock back 3 times.
Reggie and Alice looked at each other before the boy slowly knocked. They waited.
Come on, said Alice, rising to her feet. You should get out of here.
Reggie stood up and they walked to the door. A sound behind them made them both turn around. Bang, bang, bang.